In a mother's womb were two babies. One asked the other, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" The other replied, "Why, of course. There has to be something after delivery. Maybe we are here to prepare ourselves for what we will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There is no life after delivery." "What kind of life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but there will be more light than here. Maybe we will walk with our legs and eat with our mouths. Maybe we will have other senses that we can't understand now." The first replied, "That's absurd. Walking is impossible. And eating with our mouths? Ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies nutrition and everything we need. But the umbilical cord is so short, life after delivery is to be logically excluded." The second insisted, "Well, I think there is something, and maybe it's different than it is here. Maybe we won't need this physical cord anymore." The first replied, "Nonsense. And moreover, if there is life, then why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery, there is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere." "Well, I don't know," said the second, "but certainly we will meet Mother, and she will take care of us." The first replied, "Mother? You actually believe in Mother? That's laughable. If Mother exists, then where is she now?" The second said, "She is all around us. We are surrounded by her. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist." Said the first, "Well, I don't see her, so it is only logical that she does not exist." To which the second replied, "Sometimes when you're in silence and you focus and you really listen, you can perceive her presence, and you can hear her loving voice calling down from above." So welcome to the last week of this series called Small. We start off the series with a picture, and that picture is called the pale blue dot. It's a picture of us taken from 6 billion kilometers away. And the picture was trying to set a tone of appropriate smallness. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more to you than this life. That relatively speaking, the life that you're living right now, the things that you're experiencing right now, the feelings that you have right now, the things you create and feel and dream, are small in comparison to what awaits. You were born for eternal life, and eternity is worth living for. In other words, for you, death is not a termination, but it's a transition. It's not the end, it's the beginning of something much bigger and much greater than you can ever imagine. So what we've been trying to do throughout this whole series is what the Bible suggests. In places like Colossians 3, where it says, "Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth." Interesting. Really interesting. So what I've been trying to do throughout this whole series is give us a compelling vision of there and then that would change our life in the here and now. Because what we think about there and then affects the way that we live in the here and now. It reminds me of a story of two men during the communist regime in the Soviet Union who were arrested within the same week for crimes against the state. And both of them were thrown into work camps known as gulags, sentenced to 10 years of heavy labor. It's amazing though, because the first man, shortly after arriving in the gulag, found out that at the same rate in which he was arrested, that his wife and his child were killed. The second man arrived at the same gulag within the same week, but he found out that in that raid in which he was arrested, his wife and his child actually made it out and were awaiting his release some 10 years later. Well, how do you think that affected the way that they lived the next 10 years? The truth is that the first man didn't make it. He lasted 2 years and he lost all hope and lost all vision, and he died. The second man, who knew that he had a wife and a child waiting for him, he made it. It wasn't easy, but he made it through the 10 years and he was reunited with his family. Why? Because the vision that you have of there and then affects the way that you live in the here and now. It's like that story I told you a few weeks ago about Florence Chadwick. Remember her? She became, in 1951, the first woman to swim the 21 miles across the English Channel. And in 1952, she set her sights on becoming the first woman to swim the 26 miles from Catalina Island to the coast of California. She set out early one morning in dense fog, so dense that you could only see like about 1.5 feet in front of your face. And she swam for 15 hours in dense, thick fog. And finally, after 15 hours of swimming, Florence Chadwick hit emotional and physical exhaustion. She quit, and she was brought out of the water, placed into the rescue boat, and what she found out was that she was only 1/3 of a mile away from shore. She had swam for 15 hours, 25 2/3 mile, quitting 1/3 short of her goal. The next day she told reporters, "I just wish that the light would have broken through the fog. Because if I could have seen the land, I would not have quit." That's the perspective that we've tried to bring to this series. That if we have a compelling vision of there and then, it will fill us with hope in the here and now. Because my suggestion to you, and the Apostle Paul's suggestion to all of us in Colossians 3 is this. If we get a vision of heaven, it will change the way that we live on earth in important ways. C.S. Lewis said it this way: if you read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were just those who thought the most of the next. The apostles themselves who set on foot the conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, the English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade, all left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. A compelling vision of there and then will fill us with hope in the here and now. It'll change the way that we live. So in week 1 of this series, we talked about the fact that we all know there's got to be more than this. That when we look around the world and we see things, we say that's wrong. That terrorism is wrong, that injustice is wrong, that hatred is wrong, that sickness and disease is wrong. By implication, what we're saying, what we're longing for is something that's right, a time and a place and a situation where the wrong will be made right. And I believe it's God who placed that longing inside of us, and I believe that longing has a fulfillment in heaven. Even further than that, we hit those best of the best moments in our lives, those days where we say, it can't get any better than this. And we look back at those days and we long to go back there, but we can't because they're there and then they're gone. And even those best of the best moments, they don't finally fully satisfy our deepest needs. What they do is they awaken in us our deepest needs. It's a homesickness for a place that we've never been, a homesickness for a place that we've never been. I would suggest to you today that it is your Creator, it is God who placed that homesickness inside of you, and that place is heaven. We all know there's got to be more, and in week 2 I tried to say that more that we're looking forward to is worth looking forward to. Because in our culture we have kind of this odd concept, this odd picture that we've been given of heaven. It's fuzzy and it's foggy. It's angels with harps sitting on clouds, strumming all day long and singing all the way through the hymn book until they get to the end and starting back on page 1 forever and ever and ever and ever, talking about pillowy soft bathroom tissue and Philadelphia cream cheese. But heaven is not ethereal. It's not intangible. It's tangible, and it's more real than anything that we could imagine. They will be feasting in heaven. You and me will get new bodies in heaven. Resurrected, renewed, and restored. Recognizable, but exponentially more than we could ever imagine. I told you that week, someone asked me what age it will be in heaven. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine it'll be our athletic prime. For me, right where I am right now. I don't know what it would be for you. But it's not just you. It's not just me. This old earth, this old world is going to be resurrected. The Bible talks about God creating a new heavens and a new earth. A new earth, resurrected, renewed, and restored in its athletic prime. Recognizable, but exponentially more. Think about that. A new moon, a new solar system, new stars, new galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. A new Chilliwack, a new Cultus Lake, a new Grand Canyon, a new Paris, London. Recognizable, but exponentially more. Heaven is worth looking forward to. And then last week we talked about the importance of family and friends and love and relationships here and in heaven. That when you experience those best of the best moments, when you experience those best of the best moments with another person, when you have those relationships where you say, this is real me, and I want to have a relationship with real you. You know what I'm saying? And instead of the me that I'm pretending to be having a relationship with the you that you're pretending to be, or the me that I think you want me to be having a relationship with the you that you think I want you to be. No, real me and real you. Man, those moments, those relationships, they're so deep, and that's just a little taste of heaven. And when we love each other well, when we're kind to one another, when we care for one another, that's us practicing for heaven. I ended last week with a reminder, and I'll give it to you again today. Pay close attention. Pay close attention to the people around you. Don't miss it. They are your life's work. But today, as we close out this series, we save the best to last. See, when we get to heaven, we're going to be able to meet Jesus face to face. And now I want to tell you the absolute truth. I want to be completely transparent with you. There's another reason why I left this to last. Because I've spent my entire life finding this part of heaven the most difficult to understand. I've heard people say, man, I just can't wait to get to heaven. I'm going to meet Jesus face to face. And honestly, I didn't really know what they meant. And then I would go to church and they would sing songs about how Jesus dances over me. And I think to myself, that's weird. That's weird. So I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to meet Jesus, and he's going to be doing like dance moves around the room. And nice to meet you. And he's going to do a sachet. And I'm going to okay. And what's that move that ballet dancers do where they like jump up and do the splits and then come? What's the name of that? You don't know either. Okay, so but you understand when he's dancing and I'm trying to say hello, but he can't because he's got to finish his routine, and I don't get it. I don't understand it. And for me, it was made more confusing by the pictures that I saw of Jesus growing up. I got an example for you today, and I have to be truthful with you, and I got to be really careful the way I say it. Like when I look at pictures like that of Jesus, when I looked at pictures like that of Jesus, he just doesn't seem like a very cool guy to me. Like I could never figure out why everyone who ever painted a picture of Jesus gave him a perm to start with. And even as a teenager, one thing that really bothered me is how many people seem to want to paint pictures of Jesus with blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin. We can applaud that. Because it doesn't make any sense. It was frustrating to me. Even as a 15, 16-year-old, I would see those pictures and go, what is wrong with you? Like Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is in Israel, which happens to be located in the Middle East. So therefore, Jesus would have had olive skin and dark eyes and dark hair. Also, in that culture at that time, Jesus certainly would have not been wearing makeup like he was in all of those pictures. Jesus wouldn't have had lipstick and blush and mascara on. I have no problem with long hair, but there's no way Jesus would have had long hair. Because he worked as a carpenter until he was 30 years old. Like, in that culture at that time, you couldn't have long hair. It was like a health hazard if you were a carpenter. Can you throw the picture up one more time? Also, Jesus' hand would not have looked like that. Okay? Again, let me repeat. Jesus was a carpenter. In that culture, what that meant is everything to do with building Jesus would have done. So he would have been working with trees and timber and heavy stones and mortar. He would have had hands that were calloused from working hard. I guess for me it was important, and maybe this doesn't matter to you, but it mattered to me growing up. I just kind of had this feeling that I didn't want a Jesus that I felt like I could beat up. And then I would have people say stuff to me like, oh, don't you worry about that. He's all powerful. Okay, but to me that's ethereal also. And so I spent most of my life really, really struggling to understand why everyone was so excited to meet Jesus face to face. So about 6 months ago when I started writing this series, this is the week that I took the most time on. This is the week that I really asked God to help me give you a compelling, more real picture of what it's going to be like to meet Jesus. So let me start here. All series long, we've been talking about the fact that we've spent our whole life homesick for a place that we've never been. Let me take that one step further. I would suggest that whether we know this or not, we've spent our whole life missing a big brother that we didn't really, really know we had. We spent our whole life missing a big brother that we didn't really know that we had. See, the God who created you is your heavenly Father. He's a good father and he loves you. If your earthly father is a jerk, he's not a good representation of your heavenly Father. God loves you so much, and he loves you right now, no matter who you are or where you've been or what you've done. He loves you right now. And he sent his son, Jesus, into human history. And Jesus came into human history to die and to rise again, to pay the price for your adoption, to invite you into the family of God. And I really believe that we've spent our whole life, whether we realize it or not, missing a big brother that we didn't really know that we had. So I found a video, and while it is not a direct illustration, maybe it'll help us get our minds around it a little bit. Why don't you push play?
My brother Bailey, he's been a big part of my life.
The bond that we have is very strong. Our father passed away when Myers was 6 years old. Despite me only being 22 months older than Myers, I like to think of myself as somewhat of a fatherly figure to him. After our father passed away, me, Myers, and my mom, the three of us slept on the living room floor with blankets and candles. No electricity, no water, no furniture. With hardship and getting through hardship, that only helps bring people closer together. I joined the Marine Corps. August of 2008, that was the day I left for boot camp.
It was just a shock to me. I went in my room and cried. I'd never not had my brother. Now that he's in Afghanistan fighting for our country, it kind of scares me every day. He's on the line of duty, but he's always been there for me.
The last time I saw Myers play was in January 2010.
I'm guessing he has absolutely no idea I'm even outside this stadium right now.
I drove into Champaign on March 1st to come see Myers play against Michigan. The reason I wanted to come see him play so bad is the fact that he didn't know I was going to be here.
Hey, Myers.
What the
Come here. You all right?
I'm good. Tears happening. I'm so glad to see you.
I would suggest to you that you've spent your whole life missing a big brother that you never really, really knew that you had. I've told you before that my best friend growing up was Grant King. We hung out virtually every day from the time that we were 5 years old until the time that we were about 19 years old. And it's something interesting about that because when you spend time with one another, you don't really have to go, hey, remember that time? Or let me tell you about that. Of course you remember, and I don't need to tell you about it because you're with someone who's been there with you pretty much every step of the way. In fact, I've heard people say before, man, when I get together with that certain friend, we have a conversation and it's like we've never been apart. I want you to think about something. When you meet Jesus, instantly what you're going to realize is that you've never been apart. You don't have to fill him in. You don't have to wonder whether he was there. You'll know instantly that he's been there with you every single step of the way. You spent your whole life missing a big brother that you never really, really knew you had. You spent your whole life missing a best friend that you never really, really knew you had. But when you meet him face to face, you're going to know that he's been with you all along. See, I don't know your story. You know a little bit about mine, but I want you to think about that for a second. He's been there every step of the way. So when I meet Jesus, I'm not going to have to tell him, hey, Jesus, you know what? In the middle of the night, in the middle of January, in the middle of Red Deer, Alberta, I met you. You understand? See, when I meet him, my memory will include him. Like, I'll know that he was there. Do you understand? So in that moment, I'll know that he was there. So I'll know that when I was walking up the South Hill of Red Deer in the middle of the night, in the middle of January, freezing cold, it was him that was giving me just a little bit of hope when I felt hopeless. Giving me just a little bit of strength even though I felt so weak. You know, even though I felt like I was down and out, it was him that was lifting me up off the mat. And I'm walking up the South Hill in Red Deer, and I'm muttering to myself, I can't live like this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. And I'm going to know when I meet him face to face that it was his voice that told me, you don't have to. I'm going to know. And I'm going to know how glad he was and how proud he was when I surrendered my life to him in the middle of the night, in the middle of January, in the middle of Red Deer, Alberta. And I'm going to realize that I spent my whole life missing a big brother that I never really, really knew I had. I spent my whole life missing a best friend that I never really, really knew I had. Every memory I have, I'm going to realize that he's been there the whole time. So I'm going to look back to that time about 11 months after I committed my life to Jesus, and I've been going to Trinity Western University for a couple months at that point. And I remember the voices, the whispers of the voices of my past had come back with a vengeance. Loser, failure, lost cause. You know, and so I just felt crippled by insecurity and inferiority, and I just looked around that place, Trinity Western University, and I'm like, man, I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough to be here. And so I loaded all my stuff into a hockey bag, and I took it and I put it in the hatchback of my 1987 Plymouth Turismo. And I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. And when I tell you I was going to quit, I don't mean quit school. What I mean is quit me. You've been there. There's been moments in your life where you were ready to quit. So I'm there and I'm going to quit me. I'm going to quit Corinne. I'm going to quit Hope. Because I'm thinking I'm going to drive back to Red Deer. Because at least in Red Deer I know who I am. If I stay here, it hurts too much to live under the illusion that maybe, somehow, some way, I can be more. When I meet Jesus, I'm going to remember that it was his voice that said, you don't need to run. So I backed out of the stall, and it was his voice that said, park the car, Mike. And I pulled back into the stall. I pulled the e-brake. And it was his voice that said, I love you. And if you go back to running, you spent your whole life running. If you go back to running right now, you might spend the rest of your life running. It's time to stand. And I got out. And I took my hockey bag out of the hatchback. And I stood there at about 3 o'clock in the morning in the Trinity Western parking lot. And I quoted a verse that I didn't even know. Micah 7:8 says this, do not gloat over me, my enemy. Though I have fallen, I will rise. I'm giving you the NIV version. On that particular night, I didn't use the NIV, I used the MJM version, the Michael J. Mannis version, and I can't quote it to you today because there was too many expletives. But you know what? I'm going to know when I meet him face to face, he loved it. Last week I quoted for you 1 Corinthians 13, you know, the love chapter. Love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not rude, proud, or self-seeking, it's not easily angered. But if you go all the way to the end, and it's a great chapter, you go all the way to the end of the love chapter, this is what it says. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall be known fully, even as I am fully known. You will know fully that he's been there every single step of the way. And you will be fully known. You realize when you meet Jesus face to face, man, I've spent my whole life missing a big brother that I never really knew I had. I spent my whole life missing a best friend that I never really knew that I had. Look, I don't know your story exactly, but think about that. He's been there every single step of the way. It's amazing. So I'm going to know when I meet him that he was there. When, my first date with Corinne, 2 hours in, I blurted out, you remind me of Grant King. And he chuckled because he's thinking, there's only one girl in the entire world that would take that as a huge compliment, and she's in the car with you right now, Mike. You are so lucky. He was there when we got engaged, and we came back to Red Deer to visit our families after we were engaged, and we had a big fight, all my fault. You know, my insecurity and my pride got in the way, and we got in a huge fight. And he was there, and I said to Corinne, give me the ring. And so she handed me the engagement ring, and I took it, and I just threw it as far as I could into a snowbank. And I jumped in the truck, and I said, I'm driving you home. And he was there as I was driving her home across Red Deer. And it was his voice that was saying, you're kidding me, right? Are you crazy? You know she's amazing. And you know what you need to do. Just say, sorry. And I drove, and I drove, and I drove, and finally I looked at her, I said, Corinne, I'm so sorry. And she said, I'm sorry too. Now turn this truck around and we got to go find that ring. Dude, we dug through stuff. He was there. I can imagine him calling some of the angels over going, you know what? Mannis has done some insane things, but you got to check this out. He's been digging through the snow for 2.5 hours. He's about to finally find the ring. This is awesome. He's been with you too, through every good thing you've done and every stupid mistake. He's your big brother. He's your best friend. He was there when I married Corinne. And I stood up on that stage and I said, I will cherish you, I will love you, I will be faithful to you until the day I die. And inside I thought, that's going to be difficult. And he whispered, I'll help you. You understand? Like when I meet him face to face, I'll know. Like I'll recognize his presence in every single memory. He's been there every step of the way. And I'll know he was there for the birth of every one of our kids. You know, that moment when the doctor said, when Tori was born, the doctor said, it's a girl. And I looked at her and I just about fell down. because I didn't think it was possible to love someone that small, that much. And what's crazy is he loves her infinitely more than I do. He's been there for you every step of the way, every milestone, every twist and every turn. He was there for me after I became lead pastor of this church. And they told me that I had to preach on Sundays, and for years, I didn't sleep on a Saturday night. See, all the whispers of the voices in my past came back every single Saturday night. You don't belong up there. After all the things that you've done, after all the mistakes that you've made, how dare you stand up there? The whispers of the voices of my past, the whispers of my spiritual enemy. You know, he was there. And his small voice was speaking to me all along. And this is what he said. He said, Mike, I got a deal for you. I got a deal for you. He said, how about you just keep lifting me up, and I'll just keep changing the world? How about you just keep lifting me up, and I'll just keep changing the world? And I said, I think I can do that. And he did. And he has. Every twist, every turn, every up, every down. You spent your whole life missing a big brother you never really, really knew you had. You spent your whole life missing a best friend that you never really, really knew that you had. He's my best friend. And right now, I'm going on faith. Well, one day my faith will become sight. And I'll tell you, it's going to be something. Can you imagine? And when I meet him, I'm going to understand instantly the price that he paid for my salvation, for my freedom. You know that Jesus is the only one with scars in heaven? So when I meet him, I'm gonna see the scars on his hands and his feet where he was nailed to the cross. I might see the scars on his brow where the crown of thorns was mockingly shoved down on his head. And it's amazing, because when I see those scars, there's going to be part of me that maybe I'm going to want to feel guilty, but I'm going to instantly know, listen to this, I'm going to instantly know that he was glad. Like glad to do it. And I think I'm going to cry. And he's going to call me over. He's going to call you over, and he's going to say, man, I am so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. It's going to mean something. It's going to mean everything. Right now we go on faith. One day we'll go on sight. But we've been spending our whole lives missing a big brother that one day we're going to see face to face. We've been spending our whole lives missing a best friend that one day we are going to see face to face. I read this the other day. It says, nothing is more often misdiagnosed than our homesickness for heaven. We think what we want is sex, drugs, alcohol, a new job, a raise, a doctorate, a spouse, a plasma TV, a new car, a cabin in the woods, a condo at the beach. But what we really want is the person we were made for, Jesus, and the place that we were made for, heaven. He's my best friend. He's your best friend. When I was 19 years old, in the middle of the night, in the middle of January, in the middle of Red Deer, I committed my life to him. See, and I don't know what your story is. I don't know exactly where you're at. But as I close this series off today, I want to give you an opportunity today, no matter how young you are, no matter how old you are, to commit your life to my best friend, to Jesus. So why don't you just close your eyes and bow your heads right now. So it's really simple. You have a Father, a Heavenly Father who thought you up. He created you. And He loves you so much. So much, in fact, that He sent His one and only Son, Jesus. And Jesus stepped into human history. And He died on a cross, so that your sins could be completely and totally forgiven. So that any barrier that would keep you from being adopted into God's family would be totally, completely removed. And what's amazing, by the way, is that no matter who you are or where you've been or what you've done or what's been done to you, if you were the only one in history who needed to be saved, Jesus would have died just for you. And then He rose again. On the third day after He died, He defeated death. And He rose, and His invitation to you is the same as it's always been. Hey, you want to follow me? You want to follow me? Down this road called life. It starts now and it stretches into eternity. Oh, it means something. It means everything. So with all heads bowed and all eyes closed, if today is the day that you want to commit your life to Jesus, you want to just make an outward expression and raise your hand right now so I can pray for you. If you don't mind lifting it up nice and high, that'd be great. Awesome. 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 Okay, you can put your hands down. If you just raised your hand, I'm going to pray out loud, and I just ask that you pray silently along with me. Dear Jesus, thank you. Thank you that you stepped into human history because you love me. Me, just as I am. So right now, today, Jesus, I ask that you would be my Savior. Thank you that you died on the cross, and I pray that you would forgive every sin. Remove everything that could keep me out of your family. And right now, Jesus, I ask you to be my Lord. I want to follow you. I thank you that when you died so I can live. And you rose so I can too. All the way into eternity. I'm thankful and I love you in your name. Amen. Can we celebrate, church? Is that good? So that's been my prayer all series long. I love you guys so much. And I've just been praying that God would give us just a compelling vision of the there and then that would give us some hope for the here and now. Next week, we're starting a new series called Peace Came Down. It's going to be incredible. So I look forward to seeing you back, and invite, if there's people in your life who around this time of year, around this Christmas time of year, are more willing to hear the message of peace and joy and hope, next week would be the time to get them out. God bless you guys. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to see you at any of our 3 Sunday services held at Sardis Secondary School on Stevenson Road in Chilliwack, British Columbia. For more information, please visit southsidelife.com.